Jason Momoa he's joined this cast for Denis Villeneuve's Dune that is just amazing. Like I've never seen
Talk about a murderer's row of actors, eh?
Oh yeah, so like first of all, we've got Timothée Chalamet in the lead role of Paul Atreides, Rebecca Ferguson playing his mother, Dave Bautista playing the Beast Harkonnen, Zendaya playing Timothée Chalamet's love interest, Stellan Skarsgård, Charlotte Rampling, Josh Brolin, Oscar Isaac, Javier Bardem, and now they've just added David Dalsmatian from the Dark Knight, that guy who often plays like crazy characters. He's like a character actor. He was in the Ant-Man movies.
He was in Blade Runner with
Blade Runner 2049. So I mean, it feels like Villeneuve, there's all these jokes going around on Twitter of like Villeneuve is emptying Hollywood of all of its great talent, and everyone's going to be tied up making these these two Dune movies for at least a couple of years, and who will be left to entertain us?
Hold on a sec though. Are you like, you're way more familiar with Dune? I know nothing about Dune. So like, do you like the casting? Do you think they're suitable? Like,
oh yeah.
So for this character, Paul Atreides, like, what is he supposed to be like?
For Paul Atreides, like, he was played by Kyle MacLachlan from Twin Peaks in the original.
Oh, okay. So I can see a little bit, a resemblance, yeah.
A pale skin, dark hair, a youngish kind of character who is sort of like the prince of this aristocratic family in this far future galaxy where there are all these like noble houses who have to fight for control over this element called spice. And spice is both like a drug, but also the means by which their spaceships can travel faster than light. So it's this very valuable substance, and It can only be found on this one planet that's always being fought over by the noble houses. Villeneuve is essentially going in, and from the sounds of things, like, he's kind of coming at it with a lot more creative control. He's got his pick of basically everyone in Hollywood to play all of the roles. And, you know, if he even delivers something that's like half as good as Blade Runner 2049, in my view, it'll already be a huge improvement on David Lynch's version. Nothing against David Lynch, but I feel like his unique kind of sensibility was not the best fit for Hollywood at the time. The producers were terrified that he was going to deliver a kind of a commercial failure. So
cool. And it's going to be released November 2020. So that's basically award season / end of blockbuster season. So I think just based on the cast, it's really something to look forward to. And Denis Villeneuve is just like fantastic, eh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's had a stellar record the past few years. Even if Dune is something that's always felt like it's something that you might have passed by in a bookstore, like
hundreds of times.
The covers have like these giant sandworms on them usually because they're a feature of the mythology of the novels. But I would say if between Villeneuve and this just amazing cast, unless something goes terribly wrong during production, we could be looking at another pretty awesome thing. But on that note, let's start the show.
Welcome to the 4th episode of 2019 for the Extra Buttery podcast. We've got a jam-packed show again. We're going to talk about Lego Movie 2, Cold Pursuit, the new James Cameron flick, Alita Battle Angel, Wandering Earth, the highest grossing sci-fi movie ever made from China. We're going to talk TV shows, True Detective and Russian Doll. So without any further ado, my name is Jason Chen, and with me is my co-host, Robert Snow. How's it going, buddy?
Pretty good. How about you?
Not bad. Lego Movie 2. The follow-up to the highly, highly successful Lego Movie, and I believe the 4th Lego Movie after the first one, Lego Batman and Lego Ninjago.
Times have changed. You need to change with them. We have to be tough and battle ready.
Look, a shooting star, make a wish!
Oh no.
Hurry! The door is slowly closing!
Very, very much in the same vein, taking place after Lego Movie. Rob, first thoughts about this movie?
I actually just posted my review up on kinetoscope.ca recently, so I had some time to kind of like think it over recently. Mm-hmm. For me, it's a pretty like straightforward sequel. I wouldn't say it's better than the first one because it's kind of, you know, it doesn't really do anything super fresh or super new compared to the original. But it's also not like boring or anything like that. It just kind of it repeats a lot of the same beats as the original. Introduces a few new characters, but there's this interesting element in it for me when it gets to the messaging in the movie, which maybe we can get into a little bit afterwards. But I don't know. How about you?
I enjoyed it okay. I agree with you. I don't think it's as strong as the first one. Maybe because the first one feels fresh, but also Lego Movie, what I appreciate is that there's always some sort of like positive message embedded in these. So I really appreciate that. The problem is, I think it's the genre itself, where this is clearly a movie aimed at kids. So I can see the appeal, but as an adult who's looking for maybe a little something deeper, a little something more, it maybe didn't catch all my attention, but there are certain parts of it I think are always well done. Certain cultural references, a lot of sort of adult jokes thrown in there. Like there's this part where Maya Rudolph, who plays the mother of her kids, steps on a piece of Lego.
Oh, yeah.
And screams out in pain. And so I think that one's for the adults, where if you ever stepped on Lego, those things are painful. Painful. The one thing I kind of want to point out is the puns that are like littered throughout the movie. My favorite one is there's a new character played by or voiced by Tiffany Haddish called Queen Whatever Wannabe. And if you listen closely, it's a kid actually saying Queen Whatever I Wanna Be.
Yeah.
And when I first saw the name, I couldn't make sense of it. I thought it was just Lego being goofy. But now, after watching the movie, there are certain names in there like Danger Vest, whatever Wannabe I just said, that I think are really interesting and really funny play on words. It's very clever.
With Chris Miller and Phil Lord writing the screenplay, I mean, they have a pretty well developed voice by this point in the scripts that they write, and it's a really nice blend of like cheerful optimism, the puns like you were mentioning, some sort of surreal or existential humor, which I tend to really like, and their writing is often at least a couple of steps above what you'd normally expect from a typical kids movie.
Yeah.
So it's got that going for it. The one thing that, getting back to what you were saying about the kind of feel good message of it, the whole time I was watching it, I couldn't help but I couldn't shake the sense of how this movie reminded me of the Gillette ad that caused a certain amount of controversy a few weeks ago. If you haven't seen it, this is an ad. It's a 90-second spot that Gillette did before the Super Bowl or the big game. I don't know if I'm even allowed to say Super Bowl.
Why not?
The NFL has this thing where you're not allowed to actually say the name Super Bowl in digital media.
What? I've never heard of this.
I don't know if it only applies to the United States, like stuff that's published in the United States, but I know that like all YouTubers and like any online ads that are intended for the Super Bowl are always called big game spots. They're never called Super Bowl spots.
Okay.
Something about branding. So we'll have to check that before we post this episode. But anyway, the Gillette produced this ad, which is intended to kind of target prevailing ideas about like toxic masculinity and kind of riffing on their longtime slogan of the best a man can get, and instead presenting a series of scenarios that kind of show the best men can be, kind of urging them to confront examples of like, that boys will be boys mentality, or men overruling women in boardroom scenarios and stuff like that. So it's all part of this thing called wokenomics. Are you familiar with that term?
Yes.
Yeah. So like basically wokenomics is like a term that's been popping up recently to describe companies or initiatives by companies that are still like commercials. They're still intended to drive sales, but they have a social justice or a progressive purpose, and the hope being that if the company can convince their customers that they are socially conscious, socially aware, it will play a little bit better. It'll get them a little bit of social capital that they can use to drive sales. And people kind of feel a little bit mixed up about this because on one hand, they want the companies that they buy products from to have good morals and represent the values that they believe in. But they also don't know how to feel about it when the company is just doing it to sell more products.
That's a great point. Lego has always been pretty, I think, socially conscious. They use ABS plastic in their toy pieces, but in the future, they're going to try and find other sustainable materials, and one of them is sugarcane, actually. So going forward, Lego is trying to go eco-friendly with their bricks. But let's not lose sight of the fact that this is like $1 billion company whose growth has been quite staggering over the past 10 years, and now they're just translating different revenue streams into more sales and more products. That's not to say this is bad, because I think Lego has always been quite conscious about making quality products.
Yeah.
I mean, I myself already own 2 Lego Movie 2 sets. Proud owner.
Right.
So I think it is a fair criticism, but I do think that companies like Lego do a really good job of maintaining a certain standard, which I don't think I can say for a lot of other companies or a lot of other films.
In the case of this movie in particular, like obviously you've got the movie, it's using Lego's products as the basis for the character designs and the whole world of the movie. And then of course they are hoping that you'll go and buy those tie-in products, those tie-in Lego sets once you finish watching the movie. And
you're welcome, Lego.
But in the actual like narrative of the movie, the reason it reminded me of the Gillette ad was because the main character Emmett, voiced by Chris Pratt, his kind of central conflict in the story is that he feels as though he's not tough enough to be worthy of being the boyfriend, or as the movie kind of waters it down to, special best friend of the female lead played by Elizabeth Banks. And so he eventually encounters this character who represents all of like the tough, stereotypically masculine ideals that he kind of wants to have for himself. And then the movie kind of questions whether Emmett wanting that makes sense, or if that's good for Emmett to want to be that kind of stereotypical male, which of course then ties it back to the Gillette ad. But I think when we're talking about wokenomics, you have to question who's potentially getting hurt by it. Like, is anybody getting hurt by, Lego wanting to sell sets and a movie wanting to encourage social justice? Mm-hmm. In this case, probably not. And like you were saying, the overall corporate ethos of Lego is one where they as a company already have a history of being socially conscious. So it doesn't feel like a kind of convenient or opportunistic thing from them.
Yes.
Which is good. In some cases in the past, we've had like a company like Pepsi, for example, doing that spot with one of the Kardashians where
that was awful.
It kind of felt like, Pepsi didn't really have a history of making commercials or speaking in that way, and so it felt a little bit fake, a little bit forced when they did it.
But also who they picked to represent them.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
And and a moment in history that's supposed to be significant gets turned into something that makes money for a for-profit company.
Sure.
So there's that to it too.
But yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, the movie is pretty solid. I mean, it felt like it was a little bit more formula than some of the previous ones. There was a few more musical numbers that the original didn't bother with.
The musical number wasn't as good either.
Yeah, well, they literally call it like catchy song, and then the whole idea of the song within the world of the movie is to drive people crazy. So
mission accomplished, guys. Good job. Speaking of good job, how was Cold Pursuit?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So Cold Pursuit is this movie. It's directed by a Norwegian filmmaker, I believe, named Hans Peter Moland. And it's actually a English language remake of a movie that he did himself in 2014 with Stellan Skarsgård.
Gonna kill him. Those guys.
One guy could disappear. 2, who wants me dead?
3 of Viking's drug dealers have disappeared.
What makes you think you can kill a man?
I read it in a crime novel.
It's a revenge thriller, which, considering that this new version stars Liam Neeson, makes a lot of sense. Neeson has off and on been making a lot of revenge thrillers since pretty much Taken in 2007, 2008, whenever that came out. So I think going into it, the combination of, Liam Neeson, revenge thriller, the fact that it's set in small town Colorado in the winter, you might think that you know what you're getting going into it, but it's actually a lot weirder and more comedic than you'd ever expect.
In what sense? Like comedic in what sense?
Well, it's kind of got like a black comedy kind of feel to it, where it's poking fun at some very grim, very dark things that are happening, like poking fun at the way people are killed. There's a scene where a dead character is put into a casket and carried solemnly by his colleagues in this criminal organization towards a waiting truck, and then when they kind of get him, when the pallbearers get the casket onto the cargo hoist for the truck, then the movie kind of holds the shot and kind of pokes fun at how long it takes for the casket to go up and go up into the truck. It's kind of got that it's kind of a stick in the knife and then give it a twist sort of sort of feeling throughout. And it makes these weird choices about its editing. Like there's one point where a gangster played by the Canadian actor Tom Jackson takes his crew out onto a local ski hill, and he kind of goes up and stands next to one of the ski runs, and he's got his arms outstretched, and he's sort of miming along as the skiers go down the hill, and then suddenly he like starts screaming soundlessly, kind of like Charlize Theron in Mad Max Fury Road, and you're like, wait, what? I thought he was happy a second ago. And then they cut to his crew further down the hill, and they're just happily having a snowball fight, and one guy is going paragliding. And meanwhile, he's like having this outpouring of grief further up the hill, and you're like, what's going on right now? It's not bad. It's just weird. Like you don't quite know how to feel about it the whole way through.
Mm-hmm. Is it one of those like genre defying things because it just can't decide on something?
Yeah, it definitely defies genre. It's like at one moment it's a flat out comedy. At other points it's like a hard boiled neo-noir kind of thing.
Right.
So for me, like it was a tonal mix that it didn't really work. Like I can't earnestly recommend it to a broad swath of people. But if you like some of the actors involved, like Liam Neeson, Tom Jackson, maybe worth a look on like Netflix or whatever when it hits streaming. Because it's definitely weird. Like it's not, if you've ever seen any of Liam Neeson's revenge thrillers in the past, you would probably think what to expect going in. So the fact that this blends in all these comedic elements and kind of riffs on a lot of the typical tropes kind of makes it sort of fun if you're in the right mood for it.
Do you think it would have done better or gotten more positive buzz if Liam Neeson hadn't done that ill-fated interview?
It definitely probably would have made more money. I think the fact that he got pulled into that weird story over this admission of like essentially like racist thinking that he engaged in when he was younger, 20 or 30 years ago, I think he said. He talked about this, but then said that he never really acted upon it. And then he caught himself about a week into behaving this way and kind of said, oh my God. So I think maybe that interview, if people were paying attention to the entertainment press, maybe they would have felt a little bit weird about seeing the movie. I don't know.
Yeah, well, this is, I think, peak outrage culture in the worst way. I do think that, rather than concentrating about the fact that whether or not he's racist, which I don't think he is and don't choose not to believe he is, I think it goes more to show that we, even as adults, have a really difficult time processing our thoughts and feelings after something that's traumatic.
Right.
I think that's the bigger story. I think even if a guy's or a person, anybody in their 20s and 30s and 40s can be prone to very irrational lines of thought and irrational actions. And I think they really missed the point on this one. I really think they took one quote and ran away with it. Anyway, that was the only question I had, was whether or not some of the bad buzz sort of killed this movie, because that was sort of the sense I got. And there are some articles online saying that, the studios might have pulled back the marketing push a little bit because everyone was so focused on this Neeson interview.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it'd be hard to say for sure how much the controversy had an effect on box office.
Yep.
Because the way they were marketing it was very different from the movie you actually get. Like the trailer the main trailer that I saw running up to the release was a very John Wick inspired, like neon drenched kind of thing that definitely played up the action and not so much the comedy.
Yeah,
I think if you went into the movie just based on that, you would be pretty surprised, and maybe that actually affected like the opening weekend word of mouth, because if you were one of the first to see it and then your friends asked you, oh, hey, is that Cold Pursuit thing worth seeing? And then you had been surprised by what you got, maybe you would be like me and kind of say, oh, well, it was all right, but it was also kind of weird.
Fair enough. Moving on to another movie that you recently saw, Alita Battle Angel.
I'm not your daughter. I don't know what I am.
I do. You're the most advanced weapon ever.
But that's just a shell. It's not bad or good. That part's up to you.
Now on this one, I'm really curious about what you have to say about this one.
Okay, well, again, this is, I've also done a write-up on the site for this one, but
yes,
this was a property that I was like pretty unfamiliar with going in. But essentially it's Alita Battle Angel is an adaptation of a manga series from Japan about a 26th century story where there's been this catastrophic war hundreds of years in the past. Most of human civilization has been wiped out. But the story centers around this sort of divided city. Part of it is floating in this structure in the sky, and the other part is this derelict kind of industrial realm that's down on the ground, and people aren't allowed to move between the two of them. And sort of in this scrap heap of the surface world, this cyber surgeon, played by Christoph Waltz, comes across a head and torso of a cyborg girl and brings it back to his clinic, repairs her, gives her a new body. And then when she wakes up, she discovers that she can't remember any of her past, but she does remember these elite martial arts. And it kind of sets off a quest for her to discover who she is and why she's sort of like a Jason Bourne type, like super well trained with military and martial arts skills, but with no understanding of why. Because it's like this cyberpunk kind of thing, I went into it. You
love this stuff.
I love this stuff. Like, if it's got like all this connective tissue with the Blade Runner films, with the new Netflix show Altered Carbon. Like, if you like that aesthetic of that society where parts of it are like gleaming and super luxurious and other parts are dirty and worn out, kind of Star Wars style, and this kind of the stories about cyborgs and fancy technology and stuff, it can really hook you in because the visuals in this movie are really, really strong.
It sounds like James Cameron did okay with this. I'm really skeptical considering his comments and how overrated, frankly, Avatar was.
Yeah, so he came into this writing the screenplay, so obviously he brings with him all of his lengthy experience in the business, especially writing stories of this type, involving cyborgs and everything. And then he partnered with Robert Rodriguez, who's had a bit of a bumpy career recently. He making mostly sort of neo grindhouse or neo exploitation films,
right?
Very like gritty kind of pulpy stuff. So this is probably like the biggest and shiniest thing that Rodriguez has made recently. So yeah, they're kind of an odd pairing, but plenty of experience in the business.
Is the strength of the film its visual effects or the story? Because with James Cameron, it's usually one or the other, but not necessarily both at the same time.
Yeah, so in this case, it's definitely the former. It's the visuals.
Okay.
If you like cyberpunk like I do, you'll kind of go into this movie, you can stare at the screen, get totally lost in the scenery and the technology and all the stuff that's going on visually. But the story does lag behind that quite a bit. And probably the biggest problem with it is that you get this persistent feeling as the story unspools and as Alita continues her quest that the movie is holding stuff back because it wants to have a franchise. And it doesn't set up the conflict between Alita and the villains in such a way that when she finally goes after a few of them towards the end of the film, it doesn't really have any emotional weight because that they've sort of introduced other background characters who are probably going to play a bigger role in a future installment. If they get us future installment. Nothing's been confirmed yet in terms of a sequel.
Is this James Cameron planning out like a 5-film series or something like that?
If it performed well enough at the box office, I'm sure he would love to. Because I think, there hasn't been a really definitive adaptation of this story before. I think there was like a short-lived anime series based on the manga that was originally in Japanese. But it's not like it has, this story doesn't have like a really must-see version the way that like Dragon Ball or Death Note or some of those other ones have had. There's probably plenty of material there that is yet to be adapted for a TV show that they could base future movies on if they wanted to. So, I'd recommend it if you like this kind of genre or subgenre, as it were. Definitely go out and see it. You won't be bored. The performances are all really strong. Like Christoph Waltz is good as the cyber surgeon. Dyson Ido. Rosa Salazar plays Alita. She's kind of rendered in this combination of CG performance capture in the style of like the Avatar movies or the Planet of the Apes remakes. And some people went into this movie worrying that type of CG animation would kind of trigger a bit of uncanny valley, kind of a creep factor.
Yeah, it did a little for me.
Yeah, like if you watch the trailer without knowing anything about the series, you might go, ooh, a little bit. But I would say that it kind of gets past that. The animation is strong enough and fluid enough that it doesn't feel weird. Did you end up seeing it? Like, did you?
No, this is one of those like James Cameron things that I have kind of zero interest in. It does have a cast I like, so I think Jennifer Connelly is in this too as well, right?
She is, yeah. I thought of when she popped up on the screen, I didn't know that she was in it, and I was like, oh, Jason might actually like this because Jennifer Connelly is here.
And Mahershala Ali is in there as well.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
Yeah, so, but again, like this is sort of a James Cameron thing where I think if you like visuals, it's worth to go see it, but for me, where I like a little more depth in character and story, it may not be something that's up my alley. I would never say no to seeing it, but I think on my list of TV shows and movies and whatnot to watch, this wouldn't be nearly at the top. And like you said, Rose Salazar's eyes, which are like massive, by the way, kind of not unlike that Amy Adams movie, Big Eyes.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that kind of throws me off a little bit. And I think this genre alone, there's a bit of anime sort of influence and a lot of cyberpunk and a mix of CGI and live action I'm always a little weary of.
Yeah.
But speaking of sci-fi, there's also Wandering Earth, which has caught my eye.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So this is a sci-fi film from China, which by itself is kind of unique because sci-fi has never been a strength of Asian cinema. It's just not something that they really explore or go into. It's based on a novel called The Three Body Problem, which is a Hugo Award winner, a first ever Chinese winner. And it's not unlike Arrival, which is based on another sci-fi short story, which also won a Hugo Award. The film itself is called Wandering Earth, and it's directed by Frank Guo. And this is his first big budget blockbuster. And it stars Wu Jing, who is the star of Wolf Warrior 2, which recently became like the highest grossing movie ever in China.
Would that lead actor be like, what would be the closest comparison in American cinema?
Tom Cruise, probably.
Okay.
Like it's hard to say because I don't think Chinese film stars like Wu Jing, where they have like a sort of martial arts background, have the same depth or kind of performance as, say, like a Tony Leung, someone who's very into drama, who's, I think, more of a slow burn, sort of very nuanced kind of acting.
Okay.
The plot is basically like the same as any sci-fi film. The sun is exploding and the people of Earth have to find a new place to live.
Right.
Pretty generic. So what makes this really different, though, is the amount of money that's put into this. Post-production for this film reportedly took 2 years, but if you watch the trailer, the VFX looks more like a Roland Emmerich sort of like apocalyptic movie.
Okay.
So one of the things, and maybe they explain this much better in the movie, is that if you watch the trailer, a lot of the people in the astronaut suits act like they're still on Earth, like the same gravitational pull.
Oh, yeah.
All you have essentially is a bunch of people running around in spacesuits at regular speed. and which is, I guess, okay, but I mean, if you think about it visually, it's not very interesting other than the background, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna set a movie in space, it has to be everything. It can't just be, hey, let's have a black background and bunch of space debris throwing around.
That's what like Alfonso Cuarón worked so long on
yes,
gravity.
Exactly.
Was trying to build the apparatuses and the systems by which they could convincingly fake zero G.
Exactly. So this movie is in theaters now, and it's recently made a bunch of headlines too because Netflix bought the rights to this film, so we'll see it on Netflix soon. The funny thing is, Netflix is banned in China.
Oh, okay.
So I think this is a way of Netflix's way of like currying favor with China and hopefully being able to expand into their market sometime in the future.
Right.
I kind of doubt that it's going to happen because of the way the Chinese sort of media landscape operates and the whole country itself. I am very intrigued because it got some pretty decent reviews. Throwing aside the state-sponsored news reviews of this film where they talk about how great this is, but even Western audiences on, say, Hollywood Reporter and Roger Ebert have said, you know what, this is, aside from the fact that it lacks character development and it looks kind of goofy sometimes, that this is a pretty landmark picture in terms of Chinese film and how much they've caught up to Western film over the, say, 10, 15 years.
And I mean, well, for my part, I haven't seen the trailer yet.
Oh, watch it.
I do like the general concept of where they're going with the story because it's based on a thought experiment, I think, that I'm already familiar with. The idea that if you were able to remove the Earth from the sun's orbit,
yes,
and basically slingshot it out into the cosmos. If it did find another star that was similar to the sun, kind of entered the orbit of that star, it could thaw out and be just fine, essentially, if the humans on Earth were able to kind of find ways to stay warm, like, I don't know, digging down to the planet's core or something like that. So it's kind of like it's a cool sci-fi thing or principle that's fueling the story. So that kind of caught my attention.
Yeah, so the novel, it's based on the three body problem, refers to orbital mechanics. And so the three bodies are basically, I think, the planet and then the spacecraft and sort of the way it orbits around planets. Although a lot has changed from the original novel, because the original novel takes place during the Cultural Revolution, which is like mid-60s to mid-70s. And so they've clearly updated that to present day. So yeah, there's similarities there, but I would be really hesitant to describe it as a true to form adaptation like Arrival.
Well, yeah, we'll keep our eyes open for that. I mean, I'm always curious to see what foreign markets are doing with their big budget releases, because it can be interesting to see sort of what these countries are putting forward as their like AAA titles, essentially.
Yeah, I wish, movie audiences and box office gross could be broken down further by demographic, because I do think that even though this is being released in Western cinemas, I would highly be hesitant to say that it would gross a lot of money domestically, like in North America domestically.
Yeah.
Just because I think, it didn't get a lot of marketing, it didn't get a lot of buzz, it's a foreign film, there's certain language barriers that you have to think about, and we've been really spoiled with sci-fi films, I think, over the past couple years even.
Yeah, and you might see in the case of this movie a lot of expats going to see it.
Maybe
in those particular countries they might boost it up. I know certainly here in Toronto there's plenty of screenings of movies like this that are basically blockbuster giants in their countries of origin, but they always managed to program in a few screenings in the bigger metropolitan areas for the people living there who speak the same language and want to stay in touch with the cultural exports of their home countries,
the homeland.
But yeah, when it pops up on Netflix, I might give it a look, because it does sound like a intriguing premise.
You're not gonna pay to see this in cinemas?
I don't know. I
feel like films like these are better in big screens, though, right?
That's true. Yeah. I don't know. I'll have to see like what when it actually comes out here and what else is playing at the same time, because if it's going toe to toe with like some other big release, then I'm probably going to go with the something like the Captain Marvel or whatever.
Right, which is out soon. By the way, Captain Marvel has already broken records for pre-sales, eh?
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be one of the year's biggest. It's going to be like the Black Panther of this year. But
I think so too. I don't think it'll do as well, and I don't think it'll be as good, because I kind of have doubts about this movie. Just the trailer itself makes it look kind of generic, but we'll see.
Let's head on over to the small screen with True Detective.
Will and Julie. I can't find them anywhere.
That's when it all started with the town. It's Penny.
You've been keeping tabs on it. I unfortunately have not seen any episodes from season 3 yet, but maybe we can sort of dance around spoilers a little bit and just talk more generally about it.
Yeah, sure. So as of the recording, the season is not over. I believe there's one episode left, so I can't even really spoil it for you if I wanted to.
Okay.
Although there are certain like plot points that are obviously very important that have been revealed. But anyway, so this is the third season of True Detective after a disastrous second season.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't think this was going to happen.
Exactly. So what happened was, after season 2 sort of like failed or didn't get positive buzz, the studios came back to Nick Pizzolatto, the creator of the show, and said, look, like, we recognize your ability to create this universe, to create these characters, but you really cannot be the only person running this show, because in the first season, Kerry Joji Fukunaga, who directed the entire season, I think had a really positive impact and a very significant impact on how well received it was. In the second season, Pizzolatto took over pretty much everything, and I think it failed because there wasn't enough ideas from outside to keep it running for 8 episodes.
Yeah, I would agree with that, yeah.
But anyway, this season stars Mahershala Ali, one of our favorites, as Wayne Hayes, a detective in Arkansas. He's joined by Stephen Dorff as Roland West, and the plot of this season has to do with the disappearance of 2 kids, Will and Julie Purcell, in Arkansas 1980. Now, much like the first season, it jumps around 3 separate timelines, all involving the same character. So the disappearance of the kids itself takes place in 1980. A lot of things happen. The case is reopened in 1990. A lot of stuff happens. And then in 2012, there's sort of a retrospective where a much older Mahershala Ali is being interviewed by a true crime documentary looking into this case. What happens is that, like the first season, things are slowly revealed to you in each timeline. And just like a true detective sitting on your couch, you're forced to piece together pieces of information. And because a lot of the information is siloed, like certain characters know certain things that other characters on the screen don't, there's this sort of, is that dramatic irony? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
I guess
I think so.
It's a form of dramatic irony. Yeah. So
yeah, going back to English lit class here.
Yeah. So there's a bit of that. And I always found that was like the most gripping part, because true to its name, you are a detective. You do learn things as you go along, and you do have to come up with your own theories about what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, like season 1, though, this is entirely driven by the performances of Mahershala Ali and Stephen Dorff. Stephen Dorff, by the way, is excellent.
Oh, yeah?
Like, before this show, he was always known to me as that guy from the Britney Spears music video.
Okay.
Because for a while in around, I'd say like the late 90s, early 2000s, like he was going to be a big deal. Like he was one of those like Hollywood bad boys.
Right.
Like kind of gruff, he never smiled, and plays really tough male characters. But he's a chameleon in this. He's sort of like the foil to Mahershala Ali's like really strong-willed, very stiff detective, and he plays sort of like the compassionate part. It actually took me a while to realize it was him, because I thought Stephen Dorff was playing the dad of the 2 missing kids. But man, what a strong performance! What a launching pad for a lot of these characters. Because I think if you look back to season 2, even though I think there are a lot of things wrong with it, Colin Farrell was excellent.
Oh, he was. Yeah. One of the real bright spots of an otherwise like kind of down in the dumps season of TV.
The one thing, though, I have to kind of criticize the show for is that 2 things. The events of 1980 in the show and then the events of 1990 in the show are difficult to separate, because Mahershala Ali's appearance doesn't change all that much. So you have to reorient yourself every time there's a cut into another timeline.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that's something to watch for. It's easier to figure out, but there are times where like it takes a couple seconds for you to catch on to what's happening. The other thing is that season 3, the structure with the same storyline but split up into 3 different times, is very similar to the first season, where it's split into 1995, 2002, 2012. The difference between season 1 and season 3 is that Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson, who are executive producers of the show, by the way, really changed their appearance, especially McConaughey, where it's very distinct that this character goes through a really dramatic transformation.
Yeah, like he's all strung out. His, they've got him made up to look like he hasn't slept in like 15 days or something, and his hair is long. He's got this ugly kind of chopper mustache and all this stuff.
Yeah, so in that sense, the structure can get a little formulaic, but I don't blame Pizzolatto for that, because why stray from going away from something that worked the first time?
Yeah,
right. Yeah. My only problem is if there is a season 4, I don't know if I would like to see the same structure again. I like to see him do it differently.
Right.
Because it closely mirrors the season 1 too much. And as an anthology series, I think each season should be quite different from the rest, because it can get really tiring.
Well, this is something that distinguished like season 1 and season 2 was that season 1 had this strong undercurrent of like a supernatural Southern Gothic kind of thing, which then season 2 got rid of.
Like completely abandoned.
You can make the argument that like a Southern Gothic or supernatural kind of thing doesn't make sense in a season set in Los Angeles, because there isn't the same kind of, cultural mythology or whatever you want to call it. But I think that was part of what drew people to the first season of True Detective, because it had this kind of weird blend of the real and the surreal going on.
So Easter egg for you. There's an episode in season 3, kind of later on in the show. I think it's around episode 5, 6, or maybe even 7, where they reveal that season 3 and season 1 of True Detective happen in the same universe.
Oh, okay.
There are certain clues left at the murder scene in season 3 that call back to season 1 and you're kind of like, oh, okay, well, maybe he's just like playing with you visually, but then it's confirmed that it's in the same universe.
Oh, okay.
So now the question is, though, like, is Pizzolatto creating a universe like this true detective universe where there's its own set of rules, or if this is just a continuation of season 1? So it's not really an anthology anymore if it's a continuation.
Yeah.
Right? But now that you've set this connection between season 1 and 3, where does season 2 leave? Is it part of the same universe? Is it just forgotten? Was it so bad that they just, said, screw it. We're not going to count season 2 as part of this sort of bigger picture.
You could make the argument that season 2 is still part of the mythology. It just doesn't. Yes. It doesn't have that. That particular case or those characters weren't affected by any kind of that the supernatural stuff that that defined the first season. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't happening in Los Angeles at that time and place in the world of the show. But yeah, I guess maybe a season 4, if they decide to do one, would maybe confirm that a little bit more. Could
you imagine if they did like a True Detective show where all the detectives come together, where Mahershala Ali and like McConaughey and Harrelson come all together and like solve this big grand mystery? Like, that's something I'd be like, wow, this is kind of like an Avengers team up of TV shows. I think that would be weird. That'd be interesting though, eh?
I think about some of the other shows that are doing the anthology format, like the one that I've kind of stayed on top of is Fargo. Mm-hmm. So the first season of Fargo was sort of set in the same general area and time period as the Coen Brothers movie. But then the second season went back 30 years into the past and went to a different state and totally different characters, but with just some kind of notional connections to the ones in the first season. So we knew that it was all the same world, but very different time periods.
Right.
It does kind of set up possibilities in these shows, if depending on how they structure things, to have like a team up kind of season or something. If they wanted to, it's something about that style of storytelling that there's kind of a lot of narrative potential there.
Yeah. So in short, I highly, highly recommend it. Even if you got really turned off by season 2, like I did, I didn't even finish season 2, to be honest. I think you would really like this one. I think it takes a lot of elements of what made season 1 so good, put them into a different setting with different actors. Funny, actually, anecdote is that apparently the character Mahershala Ali plays, Wayne Hayes, was supposed to be a white character.
Oh, okay.
And Mahershala Ali was supposed to be the supporting, which I imagine would have been Roland West. But after meeting with Pizzolatto, apparently he swapped it. He convinced Pizzolatto to swap the characters, make Wayne Hayes a black character and Ali the star of the show. And I'm glad they made that change because he's really good. He's excellent. He really, really plays 3 different roles in this at different ages of Hayes' life. And he does it very convincingly. The only thing that I kind of want to add as a final note is that Jeremy Saulnier directed the first 2 episodes. And I believe he was supposed to direct the third.
There was some talk of him doing the whole show, actually.
Yeah, but he left. So he only did a couple episodes due to scheduling, quote unquote, scheduling conflicts. But the main story is that there are rumors that Pizzolatto and Saulnier may have butted heads over creative differences. And so if there is a season 4, I really hope that they get one director to film the entire thing with Pizzolatto as a showrunner. I don't know how much of an impact he has, positive or negative, he has on how it's directed. But I think based on Saulnier's 2 episodes and Fukunaga, what he did with season 1, that maybe Pizzolatto would be better off served as just being the behind-the-scenes showrunner.
Yeah, it does seem that way. It feels like he's a bit of an abrasive personality, and he has a lot of he feels very protective over his material.
Yes.
And so they and that's a shame too, because I really like Jeremy Saulnier's movies. He's made a movie called Blue Ruin and another movie called Green Room that are both like I love. They perfect match tonally with what's going on in True Detective. And I was kind of excited when I heard that Saulnier was affiliated originally, because I was like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. But if Pizzolatto's having a hard time distancing himself or, kind of trusting someone with the material, then it might be hard, for anybody to kind of come into that environment and stick it out with him, unfortunately. And Fukunaga is going to be busy making Bond now, so he's kind of ruled out for a possible season 4.
Another show that you're sort of keeping an eye on is Russian Doll.
Sweet birthday, baby.
What was I just doing?
What? What do you mean?
I'm out of here. Fuck!
Sweet birthday, baby.
What is in this?
Stay away from me. I'm coming down the stairs.
Jesus fucking Christ, that's dark.
Yeah, so this hit Netflix a couple weeks ago, and initially it didn't really seem like the kind of thing that I go for. It was a story about like a 30-something New York woman kind of in a quarter life or almost midlife crisis. And, just it didn't seem like the kind of thing that was targeted towards, a guy in his late 20s in Canada for one reason or another. It turned out to be this pretty involving existential limited series that kind of grabs you once you get a few episodes in, and you kind of get invested in what's going on in this woman's life, because essentially the premise is that Natasha Lyonne plays a woman named Nadia who is celebrating her 36th birthday, and she keeps dying in mysterious ways and reanimating. At this one particular point in the party, she wakes up in the bathroom of her friend's lavishly appointed apartment in New York, and has to relive this loop again. And she might die by falling down the stairs, leaving the apartment. She might die a few days later by falling into a hole in the ground, or get electrocuted. And she has to sort of figure out what's going on, why she can't fully die, find a way to stop it, and then she eventually finds other characters who might be caught in similar loops of their own.
Sounds like Looper.
No, it doesn't have the same kind of like meeting or fighting with your younger self in the same way.
Right. Okay.
There's this existential crisis going on that's supposed to be sort of an exaggeration of what's happening with her psychologically.
Right.
And it's really well performed. They've put a lot of thought into the sort of branching of the narrative and the intersections of the various characters, so that you don't get lost in the premise. And it's just very sharply written. Like it's a bit of a comeback story for Natasha Lyonne, who I was not familiar with at all.
Really? Well, she was huge in the 90s, eh? She was part of that like Rat Pack teen group in the 90s.
Right. So then she had this career of like as a child star, and then
had a bunch of personal problems. Yeah,
drugs and alcohol and problems with the law and everything. So I found an old Gawker article on her when she had a habit of popping up outside of people's apartments like totally wasted and just cluttering up space and getting into fights with people. She was a bit of a public nuisance in New York for a period of time, but now she's kind of cleaned up her act, and she's got this new show, and they haven't said whether or not they're going to do a second season, like if it's going to be an anthology or a continuation of the story that we just saw in this first block of episodes. If you haven't seen Netflix trying to like force it down your throat when you first log in, because I guess they were pretty excited about it when it dropped, I would definitely track it down, because it's really funny. You really end up caring about the characters, and it's always good to see people have a bit of a comeback story professionally. So
just like Matthew McConaughey in True Detective.
Yeah, exactly. That was right on the crest of the McConaissance. I mean,
yes.
Is the McConaissance over now? I don't know.
Oh, of course. Yeah, he's totally A-list now.
No, but I mean,
like he's not going to do a romantic comedy.
But is he back on like the downswing? Because he just made that movie with Anne Hathaway that was apparently really bad.
Yeah, but I mean, whether the movie is bad is kind of secondary to his performance.
Right, I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, every actor has hit their peak. I don't know if McConaughey has or hasn't, but clearly he's moved himself permanently into the upper tier, I think.
Right, yeah. He's not going to be making these direct to DVD or direct to streaming releases, yeah.
No, he's not going to play that dirty Texan who doesn't shower but is somehow like super charismatic, like he's moved beyond that, way beyond that.
Right, yeah.
And so I'm hoping Stephen Dorff does the same, because like,
oh yeah,
truly he is fantastic in season 2. He is better than Mahershala Ali, I think.
Oh. Even
though Ali drives the show and he's very good, but Stephen Dorff, I mean, wow, talk about turnaround,
Yeah, well, we can call this segment here about both True Detective and Russian Doll like the comeback segment in that case.
Yes.
There's nothing people like more than first to raise people up into stardom, and then to tear them down from stardom, and then to help them re-achieve stardom. It's kind of a vicious cycle.
Yes. But we should wrap up the show because we're kind of running out of time. But for listeners, this weekend is like the big weekend, the Oscars. And
yeah, so we're recording this on the 23rd, the day before the Oscars.
And Rob and I have already done our predictions. We've already had a discussion. Go back, scroll back up. You'll see our Oscar preview episodes, jam-packed full of stuff. But we do have something extra prepared for the after the Oscars.
Yeah, so we've got the first inaugural handing out of the Scopies, as we're calling them.
Yes.
Probably a terrible / somewhat raunchy sounding name, but we're sticking to it.
The first name I thought of, the Scopies.
So essentially, this is going to be a post. We're going to post it. It'll actually be up on the site by the time you get this podcast episode, but we're going to post it the day after the Oscars, and it's going to be the list of all the awards that we think should be given out instead or in addition to the actual awards at the Oscars. So we're going to go through categories like most WTF, Oscar nominee, best speech in the telecast, cringiest moment. It's going to be a bit of a riff on the whole awards race. So if you're listening to this episode and you haven't checked that out yet, we highly recommend you do that.
It'll be on the website, kinetoscope.ca. We'll tweet it out on our Twitter, kinetoscope.ca. Rob will tweet it out, JRobertsnow. I'll tweet it out at JasonChen16. We'll have more content. We'll even have a bonus post about a list of actors and actresses we're looking forward to winning, finally, the Golden Statue.
Yeah, they may not be nominated this year, but we think that just like a Magic 8 Ball, signs point to yes.
Because we all know Amy Adams is long overdue.
Yeah, she's the next Roger Deakins.
Yeah. Well, hopefully she doesn't need 20-something nominations before she wins.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. But anyway, look out for that stuff. Again, if you have any questions or comments or hate mail, please send it our way. kinetoscopereviews@gmail.com. And without any further ado, thanks for listening. My name is Jason Chen in Vancouver, BC.
And this is Robert Snow in Toronto, Ontario.
Talk to you next time.